So what are you doing for Thanksgiving?
I'm gonna go to my girlfriend's house in Evanston.
Evanston, a local girl you ended up with.
What are you doing?
Nothing.
Nothing?
No.
No, you're just staying at home.
Just staying at home. Anna's a vegetarian, so I'll have like half a chicken for myself that I'll go get at the store and. Okay, now that you know everybody's Thanksgiving's plans, what am I talking about? Thanksgivings? That is not a word. It's time for Polite Fight, damn it. I'm John Tatey, Editor-in-Chief. This is Gus Spellman. I'm all out of sorts because we are so excited to talk about this episode of Fargo and dig into its aesthetics and its meaning and how it invigorates us. One of the defining speeches of this episode is when Mike Milligan talks about the word revolution. And he talks about how it could mean just coming back around to where you were, or how it could mean a sort of cataclysmic change, a permanent change, right? So I think one of the most important ideas in this episode is this notion of polysemy and being able to interpret one word or one phenomenon in very different ways. Is Betsy taking the sugar pill or the real pill? Is Simone dead or alive? You can interpret that scene either way. And that's a very important dynamic in the season as a whole and in this episode in particular. So we have this one scene with The Undertaker, right? And you talk to me about something that you noticed about how this shot is set up.
The way that his infinity thing is set up is so awesome.
Beautiful.
It's just like a literal like swooping line right to him. It just looks like he has a lot of power, you know?
He seems eternal. He seems to be the embodiment of death. He's always been here, he always will be. But then the next shot is Mike Milligan looking in the mirror and there's only one of him. You think Mike Milligan was gonna die when you saw this shot.
Yeah, well, it makes him visually like the underdog because it's like one against many, basically.
And Mike Milligan is about to upset the myth of the Undertaker. Basically what it says to me is that Mike is telling a new story. It's an individual story. It's not like the Undertaker story that stretches into time. He's like, why can't I tell the Mike Milligan story that's told once, and here's how I'm going to tell it. After he kills the Undertaker, the next thing he does immediately is he says, we'll just tell him that the Gerhardt's got him. And
Good
that,
impression.
Yeah, I've been working on it. You know, all you have to do is do Johnny Depp, Willy Wonka, and you kind of slip into Mike Milligan. So he's, you know, to me, he's writing a new narrative the instant the Undertaker hits the ground.
So something a lot of people have been asking themselves in this episode is Simone dead or is she alive? I don't think that we can really, there's nothing in the episode I think that either you or I could point to make a case for that. I think it'll basically be like, you know, whatever the show decides.
Yeah.
But I did really love this sequence. And I just thought it was interesting because we've sort of been starting to root more for Bear, I think, as the show has gone on. And Simone is certainly not one of everybody's favorite characters. And she's always doing the wrong thing and you're always like a little bit.
Poor Simone.
But in this scene, you're sort of like, they go to great lengths to show like this character is going to die, to like forecast it to you, like Bear is going to kill Simone. You're going in between the conversation with them and this very high angle shot of first the road and then the woods that's sort of like showing you what's happening. And the further and further you get into the woods, the more and more you know like he's gonna kill her or he's probably going to kill her.
Yeah, I mean, even these overhead shots, the shadows of the trees are just cutting across the frame, you know? It just seems like this is where she is going to be cut off herself.
It also sort of reminded me of the shadows of the trees on Hansi when he has his sort of alien encounter. But yeah, I don't know, like whose side were you on in here? Who were you aligned with?
Well, I was on Bear's side, but I didn't want Bear to become what he was about to become, you know? So I was kind of rooting for Simone, but just because of my affection for Bear.
Right. Yeah, and I think that you can even see, or maybe this is just what I want, but you can see, I think, how uncertain Bear is about maybe what he even wants with this push-in with him at the end, where it's like sort of shaky. It's not as smooth as most of the camera moves in this show.
Great.
I wasn't really sure what to make of that. It then like fades to this overhead shot that's like literally shimmering. Which is another reason I think there could be some sort of alien involvement here.
Now, what did you make of the symbol scene? Because
I mean, it's very interesting. Hank hasn't been involved in any UFO sightings or mentions
not that we've
before.
Seen, yeah. What's interesting to me is that when Lou was talking to Betsy on the phone and Hank comes in and he mentions like, don't forget to feed my cat, right? And I wondered if maybe Hank wants her to see this room. And this is a little convoluted, but I'm gonna try to tell you why in 30 seconds or less. So Betsy has these pills that could be interpreted either way. They could be sugar pills, or they could be the pills that could save her life. And she seems to have chosen this interpretation that they're sugar pills. Now, to me, throughout the season, the aliens have been about a different perspective, just giving you the awareness of a different perspective on the story. And I feel like Hank wants her to have that flexibility of mind to view things with a different perspective, to not get locked into her sugar pill mindset and just get a feel for a different way of looking at things.
You think it's like a conscious desire that he has, or like he like subconsciously is like, I've been looking at things in a different way, and I know that if Betsy goes over there, she'll see that same thing, and maybe it'll open her mind up, but he's not consciously thinking about it? Or is he thinking that I want her to go so that she'll open the door and she'll see this and her mind will be opened?
I interpret it as on some semi-conscious level, he wants her to have her mind opened by this room, yes.
Okay, so that's possible, I guess. I mean, it is
Well,
also
it's
like,
just a
the cat
reading.
probably does need to be fed.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's not really speculation so much as that's just one way to look at this scene.
Yeah, I can see that. There's certainly a lot of the symbols, like if you look at them in freeze frame, that have to do with like sickness, death, sort of stuff. And it's like, is he doing research into, like, is he hoping that the aliens can save Betsy or something?
Wow, I never thought of it that way. We should note that the book here is a reference to Chariots of the Gods. It's being referenced here. And that is a book about how maybe like the pyramids were built by the aliens and how technologies from the past were brought to us by alien astronauts or some such. And again, to me, that book is about reassessing old narratives with a new perspective. One last thing I wanted to draw to your attention, Gus, is this motif of blue and white in this episode, and really throughout the season.
But I think here we've got like some very
Here we've got some
specific, yeah.
So in the scene where Floyd's being interrogated, the background has this blue space below her and white above her, and there's this dividing line that goes along the wall. And this, to me, sort of accentuates the fact that Floyd has one fundamental choice here, to my
Two
mind.
options, yeah.
Two options, right? It's the choice between snitching, basically, although it feels silly to put it that way, although that's what she says, or not, or staying the course and not allying ourselves with the cops. And then moments later, we have this shot of Mike Milligan at the Pearl Hotel, and the walls have these blue and white stripes, you know, and it's this pattern that sort of evokes the blue and white in the interrogation room, but it's so much more complex. And that, to me, again, accentuates the fact that Mike has so many choices here. He has to determine a strategy to save his ass and defeat the Gerhardts. And he, unlike Floyd, has a simple choice. He just has a complexity of strategies he could execute here. I don't think here that blue and white have any inherent meaning. I think it's just an aesthetic motif that, like I said, accentuates what's happening.
Right, and it's just something that plays on your subconscious as you're watching this.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's also other interpretations you could draw from the lines in Mike's hotel, certainly, you know, especially if you look at this shot, it like really feels like he is sort of like trapped. They're almost like bars, and he is like, he's sort of in a cage.
I love that. I love that.
And I don't know, it's not totally mutually exclusive of your reading that it's like multiple choices.
No.
But I think most of the times you'd say multiple choices. It's sort of like this character has freedom to do whatever they want.
Right.
But here, maybe you could say that all his choices are kind of what's caging him in.
I don't think you can necessarily mix the two readings, but I do think it has these different values in different scenes. And there's also, you know, the dark and light also is playing into Mike's story very much now, because the Kansas City boss is like, yeah, they told me you were one of those smart black guys, and it's just like, wow, he's got that running against him too now, that his skin color matters so much. Let's wrap it up with any tidbits from the comments?
Literary Lioness pointed out, and this to me is very confusing. It's like, how did Ed get away in between last episode and this episode? Like, they literally say like, well, we know where he's going, and then they didn't catch up with him. Like, They don't even mention like, man, I wonder where Ed is. Really, you know, like they don't even go through and talk about like, can't believe we missed Ed. That to me was very confusing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question from Literary Lioness, and it almost felt a little losty to me the way they treated the stories in this episode, because what happened with Ed and Peggy? How did they...
And I love not seeing it, but it seems like the characters should also have mentioned like what happened with Ed and Peggy. I guess that's for next week.
Yeah, that's for next week. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for helping inform our discussion this week. For Gus Spellman, I'm John Tatey. Thanks for watching Polite Fight. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.